Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today, we have a lot to talk about, starting off in the NBA. Lots of big news, some sad news. Kristaps Porzingis is questionable heading into Game 3. We'll talk about the impact of that on the Celtics looking to take a 3-0 series lead and the Mavericks looking to get their way back into the series. We're also going to talk about the passing of Jerry West, obviously a basketball great both on and off the court in the executive office. His legacy, he was elected to the Hall of Fame 3 separate times. We'll talk about his legacy, what he's done for the game to grow the game, and everything to do with Jerry West. We're also going to talk a little bit of football. Aaron Rodgers is not at minicamp today. It's an unexcused absence. We'll talk about whether or not that's good for the team, what he might be doing that's unknown, and if this is really the best for the Jets right now. And then we're going to move into baseball to close off our show. There was a trade today between the Blue Jays and the Dodgers. The Blue Jays seemingly are going to be sellers at the deadline. They trade Calvin Biggio. Biggio is not, a huge name, so it doesn't mean that they're tanking, getting rid of all of their stars, but it's an interesting kind of look ahead at what the future of their season might look like. And then we'll close our show talking about a potential Juan Soto contract as he looks to enter free agency, maybe getting up to upwards of $600 million from certain teams this offseason. But before we get into all of that, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all you would like to talk about, go ahead and throw that in the comments in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. Appreciate all of you guys for sticking around and talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday afternoon. But like I was saying, we are going to start off our show today in the world of the NBA basketball. The NBA Finals continue tonight. Game 3, Mavericks versus Celtics, the first game in Dallas. And the big storyline for this game is that the Celtics might be without star center who's been a huge part of their defense, Kristaps Porzingis. And I know we've kind of talked about this a lot. If you were watching yesterday's show, we did a breakdown of what the injury was. It's a very rare injury, something that I know I personally have not seen in sports. It's being called serious by the Celtics. They are only going to let him play if the medical staff clears him. That's the only way he's going to play. He's going to play if he can. That's what he says. His heart is in it. He wants to play. Clearly, everything that he's saying is basically along the lines of, hey, if they're going to let me play, I'm going to go. I would even go if they wouldn't let me, but it's not up to me. It is up to the medical team. Again, he's still questionable. I actually expect an update to that story relatively soon. So we'll see, because the game is in just a couple hours. So maybe we'll get an update to whether or not he is playing while we're talking about that. Well, we're talking about it on the show today. But Kristaps Porzingis misses this game. We're going to go off that assumption because everything that I'm seeing doesn't sound like good news for Kristaps Porzingis. What does this look like for the Boston Celtics? Because this is a Boston Celtics team that has dominated this series, right? In Game 1, they outplayed them completely, almost every phase of the game. In Game 2, they had a poor shooting night, which has been the downfall of this Celtics team, really in the entire Joe Mazzulla era. They haven't had, whenever they're not shooting well, they tend to lose, and they were able to pull that victory out in large part because of Kristaps Porzingis, and I know there wasn't anybody that really filled up the stat sheet in Game 2, but his defensive presence is something that the Mavericks have yet to figure out. If you go back and you watch the Mavericks versus Timberwolves series, that Western Conference Finals, you have arguably a better defense in the Minnesota Timberwolves, right? The Minnesota Timberwolves, who have Defensive Player of the Year, Rudy Gobert, 4-time Defensive Player of the Year, Rudy Gobert. They have Jaden McDaniels on the outside, but what the what the Mavericks were able to do against the Timberwolves, where they were able to draw the bigs up and they weren't able to stop the backdoor cut, those lobs. And that is what was killing the Timberwolves. That's what made the Mavericks, that's what helped the Mavericks make that series look easy, right? This is not the case with the Celtics, right? The Celtics, especially when they have Kristaps Porzingis in there, he is long and athletic enough that even if you draw him up, he's able to defend those back cuts, and you can't get those lobs over him. That bread and butter of the Dallas Mavericks offense, it's not there. Now you get the chance without Porzingis to attempt that same strategy that worked so well against one of if not the best defenses in the entire league, against another top tier defense in the NBA, and I think that's going to make it a huge difference. If he doesn't play, Al Horford is going to get a lot more minutes. And if there's one thing that we've noticed with Al Horford, it's that once he hits about 30 minutes of playing time, he kind of, I guess, runs out of energy. And, as a sixth man, he's not going to play 30 minutes a game, but when he's your starting center and then you have Luke Cornett as your backup behind him, it's not really a easy solution, right? You don't have that option to go to in those clutch moments. Kristaps Porzingis has been a huge part of offensively, even though he's come off the bench the last 2 games. He's been, in the crunch time, he's been out there. He's been kind of the center point of the offense down the stretch, and he's coming off missing 5 weeks with a calf injury. He missed basically the entire playoff run. He got hurt, I believe, in Game 4 against the Heat. And, it hasn't really mattered because the Celtics are a juggernaut of a team, but when you're playing against Luka Doncic and the Mavericks, and I truly do believe that Kyrie Irving will get right at some point in this series, when you're playing against these guys, Luka's going to beat you every time, right? And I've really loved how the Celtics have said, hey, Luka's going to beat us, just don't let anybody else beat us, right? And I think that's the right strategy to play against this Dallas Mavericks. We've seen teams try to go all out against Luka and that not work for them because Luka's going to get his no matter what. Being able to stop Kyrie Irving has been what they're doing, and I think Porzingis has really been a huge part of that. Kind of underrated down low. His rim protection is something that I think is crucial for this Boston Celtics team to continue to be as dominant as they are. Now, does this mean that if Porzingis misses the rest of the series, misses 1 game, 2 games, that the Celtics can't win? No, because this Celtics team is great, and this Celtics team is just flat out better than this Dallas Mavericks team. It's not a situation where, this is kind of an even series and you lose one of your best players. You lose one of the top 6 players and you still have 4 of the top 5, right? That is a really good situation to be in for the Celtics. And, it's a much different situation when they're up 2-0 as opposed to being tied 1-1 or down 2-0. They have a cushion. Do I expect Porzingis to miss the entire series? No. Do I think that if Porzingis plays if he plays tonight and then plays Game 4, this is a completely different outlook of the series? Absolutely. I think that if he's healthy, the Celtics end up sweeping this. The Celtics team is, like I said, they're just a better team. It's kind of a mismatch for the Dallas Mavericks. But unfortunately, he is out. He's most likely out. Still questionable for tonight. We'll probably hear more about it as the show goes on, but most likely out tonight from everything that I have been seeing and reading. If he's out tonight, I think Dallas takes it. I think that's a huge blow offensively and especially defensively. They kind of held on by a thread, and I know they're not going to shoot 10 of 40 from 3 every single night, but Kyrie also isn't going to play that badly every single night. Back at home with Mavericks fans cheering him on, I think that, he'll be able to bounce back, play a good game tonight, because this is kind of do or die. You don't want to go down 3-0 in the NBA Finals, especially against a team as good as these Boston Celtics are. Now, anything can happen in the game of basketball, but I think Porzingis is the key to Game 3, and he kind of is the key to this entire series. He's not the only thing that matters, but when we were doing our series breakdown, the key for the Celtics was those secondary stars. Porzingis, Drew Holiday, Derek White, those secondary stars, and they've really shined. We're having Finals MVP debates, not talking about Jason Tatum, not really talking about Jaylen Brown, but talking about Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis. That's those secondary stars. That's why they've been so successful. But it's going to be a big loss if Porzingis is unable to go tonight. We'll hear more about it. Like I said, I expect to hear update on his health probably about halfway through the show, and I will give you those updates as soon as I get it. But in our next segment, we are going to we're going to finish off our coverage of the NBA. Sad news today in the world of basketball as Jerry West unfortunately passed away. Icon, legend, the logo of the NBA. We'll take a look at his storied career, both on and off the court, and everything he meant to the world of basketball. So stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Body in the world. Lord, give me a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around, I feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient. Hoping one day I blow up in the basement. Statement. The top is so vacant. I don't need shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing. Sold out show over 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't replaced all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the losing bits, I'm losing shit. I'm stupid if you choose to live, but choose to dip. You choose to fight, to lose your grip and lose a gift. Losing my mind. Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just went over the impact of a potential Kristaps Porzingis missing the Game 3 against the Dallas Mavericks tonight. We will see what happens. Like I said, I expect an update probably before the show ends, as the finals happen just a couple hours after the show ends. So hopefully we hear more about that. I will get to that as soon as I possibly can. In this second segment, we're going to finish up our coverage of the NBA with some unfortunate news. Unfortunately, passing of a legend in the game, Jerry West, the logo of the NBA, part of the Showtime Lakers. He has built many dynasties. He had a huge impact on so many people in the NBA today. He's been inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame 3 times. We'll talk about his legacy, everything he meant to the game, and take a look back at his career. But before we do that, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else in the world to see if you do have a burning question about sports. Anything at all you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments or the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. Appreciate all of you guys for sticking around and talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday afternoon. But like I was saying, we're going to get into some unfortunate news in the world of sports today. Jerry West dies at 86 years old. He was a all-time great in basketball, right? He was inducted into the Hall of Fame not once, not twice, but 3 times. He was an all-star in all 14 of his years, and he was the 3rd player in NBA history to hit 25,000 points. He was part of the NBA 75th anniversary team. he was a huge part of the culture of basketball for such a long time. He's been a two-time executive of the year, so it's not just his on-the-court accolades that make him such great, but he had a hand in building the Dynasty Warriors, drafting Klay Thompson and Draymond Green. You know, he had a hand in putting together Shaq and Kobe on the Lakers back when they were running around in the early 2000s. He is the architect of the current Clippers. I know they haven't been quite as successful as those other two examples there, but bringing together Kawhi Leonard and Paul George both on the same team, he has an eye for talent in basketball, and it's something that will be unmatched for quite a long time. Jerry West was a icon in basketball, and you can't really get more iconic than being the logo for the NBA. And if that doesn't speak volumes to the kind of player and guy and basketball personality that he was, there's not really much more that can. Inducted into the Hall of Fame 3 times, once as a player after his 14-year playing career where he was an All-Star or an NBA champion in every single one of those seasons, unbelievably successful. Then as an Olympic player for his obviously his achievements abroad, overseas in the Olympics, and finally as just basketball legacy, not as an executive, although he that probably has a part in it, but just as basketball legacy as a whole, everything that he has, everything that he's done for the sport to grow it, it's crazy, and it's unfortunate that we lost someone like that today or last night. There is going to be a ceremony before Game 3. I'm excited to see what they do for him. But Jerry West, unfortunately, passed away at 86 last night. Everyone's remembers him as a great guy doing so much for the game of basketball. Really, if there's one thing that describes his life, it's basketball, right? He has the most career points in the NBA Finals, uh, and the most 30-point games in NBA Finals, right? He's been incredibly successful. He's at top of the list over guys like LeBron James, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Michael Jordan, uh, but it's a shame that we lost someone like that today. Uh, and my thoughts and prayers go out to the West family, everyone that knew him, everyone that is grieving. But we lost an icon today in the world of sports, and he will live on forever in everybody's memory. But anyway, we're gonna move on to the NFL here. Aaron Rodgers missed minicamp. It's unexcused absence. Nobody knows where he is. Could be out doing anything. But we are going to talk a little bit about what that means for the Jets. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers only played 3 snaps last season. We'll talk about how much this actually matters, if it matters, especially with a brand new wide receiver core. So stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube. Absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube, absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back, everybody, to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we've just finished up our basketball coverage for the day, going over the icon Jerry West. Unfortunately, he passed away earlier this morning or late last night at the age of 86. Everything he meant for the game of basketball and his legacy. We also talked about Kristaps Porzingis and the potential for him to miss Game 3 and what that might mean for the Celtics and the future of this series moving forward. But in this segment, we are going to move out of the world of basketball and into the world of football. Aaron Rodgers, the New York Jets. Aaron Rodgers, one of the biggest characters in the entirety of the NFL, is missing minicamp once again, and nobody knows where he is. But before we get into all of that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. Appreciate all of you guys for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday afternoon. Once again, that link is gsmcpodcast.net. But like I was saying, we are going to get into a little bit of the NFL today. Aaron Rodgers. You say that name, you have some opinions, right? Whether good or bad, either way, it's a very controversial figure in the NFL. He is the starting quarterback for the New York Jets, coming off an Achilles injury just 3 snaps into the game, into week 1 of the season, after finally leaving the Packers. A whole drawn out saga, high hopes for the Jets, and now he's finally supposed to be healthy. He is missing mandatory minicamp, and on a team that you haven't really played with. It's a little bit different than missing mandatory minicamp if he was still on the Packers. Right, with the Packers, he has those relationships, and I'm sure he's built up a lot of those relationships with the Jets. But timing is something that's so important between a receiver and a quarterback. And aside from Garrett Wilson, there isn't really a receiver that was there last year with him. I know they drafted a couple rookies. Malachi Corley has been living with Aaron Rodgers this offseason reportedly, so I'm sure they built up some kind of rapport, some kind of relationship. But when minicamp is, more or less, and I'm not gonna say I'm not gonna say it's wrong for him to miss minicamp, right? It's fine if he needs to miss minicamp for a good reason. He needs to miss minicamp for a good reason. Coach Sala said that it was an unexcused absence, but they talked, and it was for something that was very important to him. Now, for Aaron Rodgers, that could mean a lot of things, and I'm not going to go through a list of possible things because speculation doesn't really help. I'm sure we'll hear about it at some point. He likes to talk, but I feel like, especially with a new team like Aaron Rodgers is, especially with a new team like Aaron Rodgers is with, and I know it's his second year with the team, but 3 snaps, it doesn't really count. Yeah, like Kelsey says, it's unexcused. His parents are gonna get a call. But the Jets, it's a different situation because this is really his first year with it, and I feel like he needs to treat it a little differently than if he's still with the Packers. And I know he's a veteran. He gets a little bit of a, I guess, leeway there because he's been through this. He knows what he's getting. He knows how to get ready for the NFL season. He's going to be a future Hall of Famer. He's won 4 MVPs. I'm not too worried about him being ready. I'm just more worried about where he is with these Jets receivers and with the offensive line and how they are going to be able to, work with his audible calls and everything that he does at the line of scrimmage, because that's one of the things that sets Aaron Rodgers apart from the rest of NFL quarterbacks, right? His ability to make checks at the line, get the offense together, that connection he has with his number 1 receiver is usually something very special, and Garrett Wilson is going to be fine with it. That's that's a given. Garrett Wilson is going to be great, but the rest of that offense still needs to get to know Aaron Rodgers a little bit, how they're going to be able to play with him, how they're going to be able to play around him, what he likes them to do in a scramble situation. That comes from being at minicamp, and there's a million places he could be, and I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. I'm sure it's a good reason, but there is for now we have no idea where he is. He's just missing minicamp, and for a team like the Jets, they're in a competitive division, a division that with the Bills losing all their receivers and their cornerbacks and really getting a lot worse this offseason. It's it's a it's a very interesting situation, right? Because the Dolphins, they have Tua, and they don't have quite a stranglehold on that division. Neither do the Bills. The Patriots are rebuilding. This is the division that the Jets can get, and I feel like having Aaron Rodgers there is something that, especially at camp, is something that could really make a difference for this team, right? This is a team that as we saw has one of the best defenses in the league last season, and their defense is going to continue to be great this season. It might not be the best defense in the league, but it is going to be one of the better defenses in the league. With the cornerback duo that they have there, their pass rushing, it's a stacked defense, and if Aaron Rodgers is playing, they have a chance to make a lot of noise in a very crowded AFC. But you have to be there to get to know these players. And unfortunately, with him, like I said, missing that mini camp, and I know it's only 2 days and I'll have more practices and stuff, but installing that offense is very important. Kelsey asked, do the Chargers have a chance this year? I'd like to say the Chargers do. They obviously go out and hire Harbaugh from Michigan. Herbert is still there. They did lose all their wide receiving weapons. They got a receiver in the draft, and Palmer is a guy that I really like. But you're in a division with the Chiefs there if you're the Chargers. And as much as I want to say they have a shot, the Chiefs are going to win probably going to win that division. And with how crowded the AFC is this year, we're just talking about the AFC East. You have the Jets, the Dolphins, and the Bills, all potential playoff teams. The AFC North, with all four of those teams potentially being playoff teams. The Chargers kind of are that odd man looking out. So it's not that I don't think they have a chance, because I think Justin Herbert is a top 5 NFL quarterback, and that's the hardest position to have, and as long as you have a quarterback, you have a chance. But I just don't know if, with how good the AFC is. If they were in the NFC, I think they'd definitely make the playoffs. But that's just the cards you draw sometimes, unfortunately. But yeah, that's my outlook on the Chargers. We'll do a more detailed breakdown on all these NFL teams as we get closer to the season. We'll do a schedule breakdown and off-season breakdowns as we get later into the summer. But for now, we are going to move into our baseball segments for the day. Big trade happened today between the Blue Jays and the Dodgers. We'll talk about the implications of that, and then we'll end our show talking about Juan Soto and what a potential contract might look like for him in the offseason. So stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished talking about Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers. He misses, the New York Jets. Got the wrong team there. He is missing minicamp. It's an unexcused absence. We'll talk about. We talked a little bit about how that might affect them heading into the season. We also talked in the NBA about the impact of Jerry West as he unfortunately passed away at 86 this morning, and we talked about Kristaps Porzingis being questionable and what that might mean for the Celtics heading into Game 3 tonight. But we are going to move into the MLB, into baseball, for the rest of the show today. We're going to start off with a trade. Our second big trade of the MLB season, the Blue Jays make a trade with the Dodgers. The Dodgers add Calvin Biggio for a minor league pitcher. Biggio has been struggling a little bit, and we'll talk a little bit more about the implications of that in just a second. But before we do, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all you'd like to talk about, go ahead and throw that in the comments, in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. Appreciate all of you guys for sticking around and talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday afternoon. But like I was saying, we are going to get into some baseball here, and baseball season is heating up. We've started to hit summer, bats are starting to go, and we have a trade. The Blue Jays make a trade with the Dodgers, sending Biggio to LA for a minor league pitcher. And the Blue Jays are a very interesting team, right? If you look at their lineup, you say, hey, they should be good. They could compete for the playoffs. You have Vlad Guerrero Jr., who just a couple years ago was top 3 in MVP voting. You have Bo Bichette at shortstop, who's a great rising young star, and the pitching staff has been solid. Kikuchi has been great on the mound for the Blue Jays, and they have top 3 Cy Young voting. They had a couple Cy Young finalists last year that are still pitching in that lineup. This is a team that should be good, and yet they're not. And this is a team that has had a lot of rumors around them being sellers at the deadline. I think this is the first step towards it. Now, obviously, we still have about a month until the trade deadline is, but Biggio, who was on the 40-man roster, gets traded to the Dodgers. The Dodgers, who don't have as huge a lead in the NL West as they kind of want to right now. The bottom of their order has been struggling a little bit. They've been hurt a little bit. Adding a utility outfielder like Biggio is something that will help them. Now, like I said, he wasn't having a great season. He was hitting 200 on the offensive side. So, you're not going to get too much in return for him. But I think what this signals more than the Dodgers trying to get better, which, of course, they're trying to win a World Series. This is a cheap rental for a guy who is kind of having a down year, can turn it around. Instead of, looking at it this way, this is more a case study on the Blue Jays, right? Because the big question of the trade deadline really centers around them. Are they going to move off their stars? They haven't really paid a lot of them yet. They're kind of at the point where if they wanted to, and this era really hasn't been working out too well for them. They had that run in 2021. They've made the playoffs a couple times as wild cards, but they haven't really had a deep playoff run yet, and they're continuing to struggle year over year. They're not getting better. They're getting worse as a team, and that's not where you want to be as a young team. This is still a very young team. They made a couple trades that kind of blew up in their faces. They made one with the Arizona Diamondbacks last season that obviously the Diamondbacks ended up making the World Series, and they were not nearly as successful. They've made a couple of interesting moves, ones that have not worked out for them, and now they have they kind of have to make a decision. Are they going to blow it up? And I feel like this move kind of signals that they are. I'm curious what kind of trade compensation they can get for Vlad Guerrero. There were trade talks for him already. I wasn't sure if it had progressed that far, but some stuff came out in the last couple weeks about some potential trade talks there. Bo Bichette already had some trade rumors swirling around him. His contract is expiring sooner. They can get a good haul and they can get a solid rebuild going if they trade some of these guys. A quick rebuild is something that's, very important in a baseball team, right? You can kind of be in the dredges in the chambers of the MLB for a long time, especially as a smaller market team. Toronto isn't drawing all these great free agents. It's not in New York. It's not in LA. They're not going to be able to draw these huge free agents. They need to build from within. And being able to get all these assets in a trade, kind of like the Washington Nationals did with Juan Soto and Trey Turner and Max Scherzer. They were coming off a World Series. They flipped all their assets, and now they're probably about a year or two away from being competitive again. Just a real quick rebuild process, and I think that's kind of what the doctor's prescribing here for the Blue Jays. And it sucks. It's not an easy decision to make. You don't want to be that front office that pulls the trigger on blowing up a young team like this that still you can see the talent, still you can see the potential in, and it not work, right? There's no such thing as a guarantee in baseball, right? There's no such thing as a guaranteed prospect, and you're not going to get, a top tier major league player for these guys. You're gonna get some younger guys in the minors that top in their systems, but you're not gonna get like a current major league player for these guys. So it's a big risk to take, and it's never easy. Like I said, it's never easy to be that team, be that front office, be that GM, be that coaching staff that says, hey, we can't do it. It's time to start over, especially when it's still kind of up in the air. But a lot of times that's the best thing to do. And that I feel like that's the situation that the Blue Jays find themselves in right now, right? It's going to sting. It really is. They have a lot to give up. They have a lot of really good players that they can give up and get a lot back in return. If they want a quick rebuild, and maybe I'm giving up too fast on this team. They made an all-in push just a couple seasons ago, and it didn't work out. And once you make that all-in push, you kind of have to know when to fold and go back. And I think now's the time for the Blue Jays. There's still a month for them to turn it around. And anything can happen in a month of baseball. Like I said, nothing in baseball is a guarantee. And this Biggio trade isn't a huge trade that's really shifting the power balance in Toronto or in LA. But it's something to kind of keep an eye on as like a signal flare for what the Blue Jays might do. They're having these trade discussions. They're thinking about it. And thinking about it is the first step to actually doing it, obviously. So we'll see what happens. Like I said, I think it's time to blow it up for Toronto, and I think this might be this might be time for the Blue Jays to blow it up. We'll see what happens though. A month until the trade deadline. We'll follow more on that. There's plenty of other baseball stories, just like Juan Soto, who is entering who's just like Juan Soto, who's entering into free agency this offseason. He is the next big thing to enter the free agent market. Obviously, we had Aaron Judge, his running mate right now, entered just 2 years ago, and Shohei Ohtani, both as the big whales, and now it's Juan Soto. We're going to take a look at what experts say his contract might look like, and talk a little bit about some precedents that were set even with him beforehand. So stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished talking about the Blue Jays trading away Calvin Biggio to the Dodgers for a minor league pitcher. What that might signal for the Blue Jays as we inch closer to the trade deadline, about a month from now. In this segment, we're going to talk about Juan Soto and what he might be looking at getting in the offseason. But before we do, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all, go ahead and leave that in the chat, in the comments. I will get to it as soon as I can. For example, Eric says, in our last segment, we were talking a little bit about when is the right time to blow up a team. And we were talking about it from a front office standpoint. He says it's not easy as a fan either. He says he's an Angels fan. I thought they were going to do right by Shohei and Mike Trout, but they still can't do it. And the Angels are a whole nother conversation, right? The Angels might have the worst ownership group in all of sports currently. So it's tough to do right by them. They tried to do right by them, but when you can't, it's a little bit of a different situation. You probably had two of the best players on the planet. I don't think there was a way you could blow it up, and they just kind of were bad the whole time. And it wasn't really because they were bad, only because they were bad. A lot of it was, oh, if they got pitching, they were good, or oh, if they got healthy, they would be good. So it's a little bit of a different situation there than with the Blue Jays currently, but it is a very similar situation, and that's a good point. It's not easy as a fan. Like I said, I brought up the Nationals as an example, but I am a Nationals fan, and when they did that, there were two brains. It was the front office brain of, oh, I guess that makes sense, and the fan brain of, hey, we're going to be bad now, So it sucks from really everybody's perspective when you have to pull that trigger on a rebuild. But speaking of the Nationals and Juan Soto, he is going to be a free agent this summer, or I guess this fall, this autumn, once the season ends. And the way he's playing himself into a huge contract. Juan Soto already was one of the best players in the league, as shown by his $440 million offer that he turned down to stay in Washington. That's before he was traded to the Padres, and that was a disaster. He hated it there. Really, it was not fun for anybody. That clubhouse, that locker room was a mess. Nobody liked each other, and that's why they didn't win anything. And in baseball, that's one of the most important things. Before he got traded to the Yankees, and before it seemed like he was having so much fun on the Yankees, which sucks as a Nats fan, because I truly did believe that there was a chance that Juan Soto comes back to Washington, which is not something that I've seen a lot of people talk about, the fact that maybe he can come back to the district, the nation's capital, but he's already won a ring, and he's going to get paid regardless of where he goes, but I don't think a ring is motivating him. He went from having a great time in the Nats clubhouse to having really a nightmare time in the San Diego Padres clubhouse. And I think really the most important thing is that he'll have fun playing baseball, right? Because he's already won one, and I'm sure he wants to win more. But I think that's his number one thing. And he had fun in Washington, so the chance he comes back. Now, he's having fun with the Yankees, and I think that kind of takes the wind from that sail. But taking a look at some numbers, right? I brought up the fact that he turned down a $440 million contract, which is insane to me. I know people are talking about how can Dan Hurley turn down $70 million? How can you turn down $440 million? That blows my mind. But he knew he was going to get more. Smart player. He's one of the best players in the league. He gets on base. He may be the best player of all time at getting on base. He's challenging records. He's challenging Barry Bonds records for that, and he's not even really getting intentionally walked too many times. His plate approach is something that is nearly unmatched, and then his swing is very pretty from the left side there. But he's having a huge season in New York. He's an MVP frontrunner, and Soto to New York always was kind of a thing. But looking at some numbers, there was an article that ESPN put out recently, polling 28 people about what the numbers might look like for him, and they found that the average salary, the average of the 28, there were people that said he'd get up to $655 million, but the average that they're saying is a 12-year contract for 498 for 12 years, 500 million basically. And if I'm Juan Soto, I'm not taking anything less than 500 because I guarantee that there is a team out there that would pay 500. Kelsey says Soto to the Dodgers. The Dodgers, I bet you would pay 500 million to get Juan Soto, especially if they don't win a World Series this year. I bet you they would pay $500 million to go get Juan Soto. And that's a very intriguing offer. Go join 3 MVPs in that lineup. Go be on a super team. But New York, also a team. The Yankees are a team that also is going to offer him a lot of money, especially seeing how successful that he's been with a guy like Aaron Judge recently. I mean, that 1-2 punch is deadly. It's super fun to watch, and it's powering them, even without Garrett Cole, who is coming back soon, and the pitching staff is going great without him. But Soto really drove them through the first month of that season while Aaron Judge was struggling, and having that backup plan to Aaron Judge when he goes through a struggle or an injury is huge. Eric says Juan Soto to the Angels, and honestly, if Shohei and Mike Trout were still there, maybe. The Angels love to pay for hitters, but since Shohei's gone, I don't think he's heading over there. Mike Trout's kind of on the end downtrodden of his career, and I know that's kind of crazy to say because he was putting up MVP numbers before he got hurt this season. But you know, Anthony Rendon is there, former teammate with the Nationals. There's a lot of reasons to go there. LA is a nice spot, but I think if he's going to LA, he's going to the Dodgers. Unfortunately, Eric. I think him in an Angels uniform would be a lot of fun, and I would love to see him paired with Mike Trout. That would be because Mike Trout, more than anybody in the league right now, deserves a World Series. And if they could get Juan Soto, that would be awesome. But I don't see that in the cards for them, especially since their owner is notoriously cheap. So we'll see what happens. But if I had to put my money on it right now, I think there's been a lot of things thrown out there, right? The Dodgers, the Giants, they love to throw money. They almost signed Aaron Judge away from the Yankees just a couple seasons ago. They also almost had Shohei earlier this season. Ghost of Grulias says it's spelled Nationals. I don't know why it's spelled that, but it's I'm a Nats fan, so it's that's a little bit of hope that I have in me there, right? That he comes back, the return. I can wear my Juan Soto jersey loud and proud again instead of everybody whenever I go to opposing stadiums being like, oh, he's not on your team anymore. But you know, it's going to be really interesting to see what he gets, because he's not going to get that Shohei Ohtani $700 million contract because he doesn't have that pitching aspect to his game. But what he does offensively is going to be what he does offensively is going to be worth a lot of money. And like I said, there are estimates as low as 450, which I think is crazy. He was offered 440 3 years ago. There's no way that he gets anything less than 500, in my opinion, all the way up to 650, which is a little on the high end. If I'm trying to guess where it's at, if I'm a GM, I'm not paying. I mean, I'm paying in between, somewhere in the 500s for him. If I can get him for 500, I think that's a steal, quite honestly. We're talking about a guy that instantly can turn around your offense. Just drop of a hat. He's that kind of special player offensively. We'll see what happens, but he is going to be the big fish of this offseason. And it's rare that we see so many great players hit free agency, especially in baseball. And it's really cool to see this because we get bidding on the market and players moving around. But like before Bryce Harper kind of hit the open market back in 2018, you never saw stars in their prime hit the open market. These MLB teams would lock them up for 15 years and never let them leave. Obviously that's the smart thing to do when you have a guy like that, because the longer you have a contract, the better it's going to age, as long as they keep up their potential or what you see in them. But Juan Soto, following Shohei Ohtani, following Aaron Judge, that's 3 players in a row, 3 superstars in a row in 3 straight seasons that have hit the open market. And I think that's really fun for the baseball offseason. You get these huge stories. There's always some craziness going on in the offseason in baseball, but whenever you get these huge megastars out there, it amplifies up to 11. And I'm so excited to see what Juan Soto gets, because he is he's one of my favorite players. Obviously, a little bit of bias in there, and I think he deserves all the money. But yeah, looking at it right now, before he wins MVP this season, $500 million. If he wins MVP, I'm sure he can get that up to $600. But it's going to be a long-term deal. It's going to be one of those 10-year deals with huge average annual value. But anyway, thank you everybody so much for tuning in to today's show, Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. I appreciate all of you guys for participating in the chat. We'll be back here same time, same place tomorrow, talking about everything that's going on in the world of sports, Game 3 of the NBA Finals, anything else that happens. I will see you then. Bye-bye.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool. My pillow feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Inside the shit in the coffee.